The plea from the stars. The crystalline chamber of the Charonian Alliance flickered with distress signals from 100 dying worlds. Ambassador Zalara's translucent form trembled as she processed the latest reports from the outer territories. Her species, the Chironians, had evolved beyond physical bodies millennia ago, existing as pure energy constructs. Yet even in her ethereal state, she felt something her kind hadn't experienced in centuries: fear. The holographic display showed another world falling. Terex Prime, home to 12 billion peaceful Meridians, had gone dark just 3 hours ago. The last transmission showed massive black ships tearing through their defense satellites like paper. The Skorath Dominion had claimed another prize in their relentless march across the galaxy. Around the council chamber, representatives from 42 different species watched the horrifying footage in silence. The Elendari delegate, a being of living crystal named Prism, resonated with a low harmonic tone of despair. The aquatic Neptari ambassador floated in his environmental suit, his bioluminescent skin flashing patterns of distress. Even the ancient Voidwalkers, who claimed to have seen the birth of stars, looked troubled. For 300 cycles, the Chironian Alliance had maintained peace through diplomacy and trade. They had built a civilization spanning 10,000 star systems, connected by quantum gates and bound by mutual respect. War was something they studied in historical archives, not something they practiced. Their weapons were ceremonial, their soldiers were honor guards, and their ships were designed for exploration, not combat. The Skorath were everything the Alliance was not. They emerged from the dark space between galaxies 2 cycles ago, their massive dreadnoughts appearing without warning at the edge of Alliance space. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted beyond conquest. They didn't negotiate, didn't communicate, and didn't show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, stripping worlds of resources and either killing or enslaving entire populations. The Skorath warriors stood 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor that could deflect plasma weapons. Their ships were floating fortresses, each one capable of destroying a moon. They bred for war, lived for war, and knew nothing else. In just 2 cycles, they had conquered 800 systems and killed over 3 trillion sentient beings. Zalara pulsed with determination as she addressed the assembly. The situation had become desperate enough to consider the unthinkable option they had been avoiding. There was one species, isolated in a distant spiral arm of the galaxy, that the Alliance had deliberately avoided contact with for centuries. Not because they were hostile, but because they were unsettling. The humans of Earth had been observed from afar for generations. While other species evolved beyond violence, humans had perfected it. They fought wars over resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes just because they could. They had nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. They created weapons that could crack atoms and poisons that could kill millions. They were creative in their violence in ways that disturbed even the most pragmatic Alliance observers. Yet they had survived. More than survived, they had thrived. In just a few thousand years, they had gone from cave dwellers to space travelers. They had faced extinction events, global wars, pandemics, and environmental collapse, and each time they emerged stronger. They possessed something the Alliance had lost: the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates argued that involving humans would be trading one monster for another. Others pointed out that humans had shown capacity for great compassion alongside their violence. They had eliminated diseases, fed the hungry, and even begun to restore their damaged world. Perhaps their dual nature could be channeled for good. Chancellor Morgath of the Zentari Confederacy finally spoke the words everyone was thinking. The Skorath will reach the core worlds in 60 cycles. Our fleet has lost every engagement. Our weapons barely scratch their shields. If we do nothing, our civilization ends. The humans might be dangerous, but they're our only option. The vote was closer than Zalara had hoped, but it passed. Within hours, the Alliance's most advanced communication array was transmitting a carefully crafted message toward the Sol system. The message contained the history of the Alliance, evidence of the Skorath threat, and a desperate plea for assistance. It offered technology, resources, and permanent membership in the Alliance in exchange for military aid. The response came faster than expected. Within 7 Earth days, a simple message arrived. "We're listening. Send coordinates for a meeting." The meeting took place on Harmony Station, a neutral facility at the edge of Alliance space. Admiral Marcus Reeves arrived in a ship that made the Alliance delegates nervous. It was small compared to their vessels, but every surface was covered in weapons. It moved with a predatory grace that their own ships lacked. It was built for one purpose: war. Admiral Reeves was not what they expected. He was calm, professional, and listened carefully to their presentation. He asked intelligent questions about Skorath tactics, technology, and vulnerabilities. He studied their battle recordings with an intensity that made even Zalara uncomfortable. When he finally spoke, his words were measured but carried an undertone of something dangerous. The Admiral's assessment was blunt. Your people forgot how to fight. You've had peace for so long that you've lost the edge needed for survival. The Skorath haven't. They're apex predators and you're prey. But predators have weaknesses. They're overconfident, predictable, and they've never faced anything like us. He explained that humans had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every war they fought, every weapon they built, every strategy they developed had been training for a threat like the Skorath. They had contingency plans for alien invasion that most of their own population thought were paranoid fantasies. They had weapons that the Alliance had never imagined because the Alliance had never needed to imagine them. The terms were simple. The Alliance would provide their advanced technology, faster than light drives, energy shields, and manufacturing capabilities. Humanity would provide the one thing the Alliance lacked: the willingness to wage total war. Not the ceremonial conflicts the Alliance remembered from their histories, but the kind of systematic, ruthless warfare that humans had perfected over millennia. Some delegates were horrified when Reeves explained human military doctrine. They didn't just plan to defeat the Skorath. They planned to ensure the Skorath could never threaten anyone again. When asked if that meant genocide, Reeves responded coldly that it meant whatever was necessary to protect innocent lives. Within days of the agreement being signed, Earth underwent a transformation that stunned Alliance observers. Every factory converted to military production. Civilian shipyards began producing warships. The entire planet mobilized with an efficiency that seemed impossible. They had done this before, Reeves explained. They called it total war mobilization, and they had gotten very good at it. The first human fleet arrived at Alliance staging grounds just 30 days after the agreement. The ships were smaller than Skorath dreadnoughts but moved like predatory animals. They were painted black with names that made the Alliance translators struggle: Vengeance, Retribution, Annihilation. The crews were volunteers, men and women who had left everything behind to fight an enemy they had just learned existed. Captain Sarah Jung commanded the lead destroyer, Nemesis. She briefed the Alliance observers on human tactics with a casualness that belied their brutality. They would not engage the Skorath in honorable combat. They would strike from the shadows, target supply lines, and use psychological warfare. They would turn the Skorath's own brutality against them. The Alliance watched in fascination and horror as humans prepared for war. They didn't just train their bodies. They prepared their minds. They studied every piece of footage of Skorath atrocities, not to understand their enemy but to fuel their rage. They turned anger into a weapon as precise as any plasma cannon. When news of humanity's involvement reached the Skorath, their response was predictable. They sent a massive fleet to Earth, intending to eliminate this new threat before it could spread. They didn't understand that they had just made a fatal error. They had threatened humanity's home, and there was nothing more dangerous than humans defending their world. The Battle of Sol would go down in galactic history as the moment everything changed. The Skorath fleet, over 1,000 ships strong, emerged from hyperspace expecting to face a primitive civilization. Instead, they found Earth transformed into a fortress. Every moon was a weapon platform. Every asteroid was a missile. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a trap. As the Skorath fleet burned in the light of humanity's sun, Admiral Reeves sent a message to both the Alliance and the Skorath Empire. It was simple and chilling. You asked for our help. Now you'll see what humanity does to those who threaten the innocent. We're coming. The unleashing of human fury, the transformation of humanity from an isolated species to the galaxy's most feared military force, took just 6 months. Alliance scientists watched in amazement as humans adapted their technology with impossible speed. They didn't just copy Alliance designs. They improved them, weaponized them, and created hybrid systems that shouldn't have worked but did. Dr. James Patterson led the integration team, working 18-hour days to merge human and Alliance technology. The results were terrifying. Humans took peaceful Alliance medical scanners and turned them into weapons that could disrupt Skorath nervous systems. They modified mining equipment into planet-cracking bombs. They even weaponized their entertainment technology, creating psychological warfare tools that could broadcast directly into Skorath minds. The first major offensive came at the Battle of Kalora system. The Skorath had fortified the system with 10,000 ships and considered it impregnable. The human fleet that arrived consisted of just 300 vessels. The Skorath commander, Warlord Thrax, actually laughed when he saw the size of the human force. He ordered his fleet to crush them quickly and move on to more important targets. The humans never engaged directly. Instead, they deployed a weapon the galaxy had never seen: antimatter mines designed to look like debris. As the Skorath fleet moved to attack, thousands of these mines activated, creating a chain reaction that tore through their formation. In the chaos, human ships struck from multiple vectors, using hit-and-run tactics that left Skorath commanders confused and angry. Captain Zhang led her squadron in what humans called a wolf pack attack. Small groups of ships would isolate single Skorath dreadnoughts, overwhelm their shields with coordinated strikes, and destroy them before reinforcements could arrive. They used the Skorath's own size against them, darting between their massive ships like insects, impossible to target but deadly in their precision. The psychological warfare component was even more devastating. Humans had studied Skorath culture and found their weakness: pride. They broadcast the destruction of Skorath ships across the galaxy, set to human music that somehow made it more terrifying. They sent messages in perfect Skorath language, taunting them, challenging their honor, and predicting their defeats with uncanny accuracy. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Torres led the ground forces, introducing the galaxy to human infantry tactics. While the Skorath expected formal battlefield engagements, humans fought in the shadows. They used guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and assassination. They poisoned water supplies, destroyed power generators, and spread fear through Skorath ranks. On the conquered world of Altair 6, Torres led a mission that would become legendary. With just 50 soldiers, he liberated a slave camp holding 1 million Alliance citizens. They didn't attack directly. Instead, they turned the Skorath's own weapons against them, hacked their defense systems, and caused their own fortifications to fire on Skorath positions. The psychological impact was devastating. The Skorath, who had never known fear, began to experience it for the first time. The turning point came at the Battle of Nexus Station. This massive space station served as the Skorath's primary command center for their invasion. It was protected by 20,000 ships and considered the most heavily defended position in the galaxy. The human force that arrived consisted of just 1,000 ships, led by Admiral Reeves himself aboard the battleship Extinction. The battle began with what appeared to be a suicidal frontal assault. Human ships charged directly at Skorath lines, taking massive casualties. The Skorath, believing humans had finally made a fatal error, committed their entire fleet to the engagement. That's when the trap was sprung. Hidden in the cosmic background radiation, 500 human stealth ships had been waiting for days. As the Skorath fleet engaged the frontal assault, these ships struck from behind, targeting command vessels and communication arrays. At the same time, human cyber warfare specialists, led by Major Anna Kim, infiltrated Skorath computer networks and turned their own defense platforms against them. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, Nexus Station was in human hands, and the Skorath had lost 60% of their total fleet. More importantly, they had lost their aura of invincibility. Across the galaxy, enslaved populations began to rise up, inspired by humanity's example. The human propaganda machine, something the Alliance found distasteful but effective, went into overdrive. They broadcast images of defeated Skorath, of liberated worlds, of humans and Alliance species fighting side by side. They created symbols of resistance, songs of defiance, and stories of hope. They turned the war from a military conflict into a crusade for freedom. Commander Lisa Park pioneered what humans called asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. She led raids deep into Skorath territory, not to conquer but to cause chaos. Her forces destroyed shipyards, disrupted supply lines, and freed slave populations. They left behind weapons and training for resistance movements, turning every conquered world into a battlefield. The Skorath, for all their military might, couldn't adapt to human tactics. They were used to enemies who fought with honor, who met them in open battle. Humans fought with cunning, deception, and a creativity and violence that seemed limitless. They used biological weapons that targeted Skorath specifically, computer viruses that crashed their navigation systems, and psychological operations that drove Skorath commanders to paranoia. The final phase of the war began when humanity located the Skorath homeworld. It was hidden in a nebula, protected by the largest fleet in their empire. The Alliance Council was divided on what to do. Some wanted to negotiate now that the Skorath were weakened. Others wanted to blockade the system and starve them into submission. Humanity had a different plan. Admiral Reeves presented it to the Alliance Council with characteristic bluntness. The Skorath had shown no mercy to trillions of innocent beings. They had destroyed entire civilizations for sport. They would do it again if given the chance. The only solution was to end them completely. The assault on the Skorath homeworld involved every human ship and millions of Alliance volunteers who had been trained in human tactics. But the real weapon wasn't the fleet. It was something humanity had developed in secret, a virus designed to target Skorath technology. Major Kim and her team had spent months perfecting it, using captured Skorath systems as test subjects. The battle began with the largest space engagement in galactic history. 50,000 ships from both sides clashed in the nebula, turning space itself into a storm of energy and debris. But while the fleets fought, human special forces teams had infiltrated the Skorath homeworld. They didn't come to conquer. They came to deliver the virus directly to the Skorath Central Command Network. The virus worked perfectly. Within hours, every Skorath system connected to their network began to fail. Ships lost power, defense platforms went offline, and their entire technological civilization began to collapse. The Skorath, who had never developed backup systems because they had never needed them, watched helplessly as everything they had built crumbled. The ground invasion that followed was swift and decisive. Human and Alliance forces landed on the Skorath homeworld, but they found little resistance. The Skorath warriors, without their technology, without their ships, without their weapons, were just another species trying to survive. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy had fallen in less than one Earth year, but humanity surprised everyone, including the Alliance, with what came next. They didn't exterminate the Skorath. Instead, they offered them a choice: surrender unconditionally and accept re-education, or face complete isolation from the rest of the galaxy. The Skorath, broken and defeated, chose surrender. The re-education program was humanity's most controversial and perhaps most brilliant strategy. They didn't try to change Skorath nature. They redirected it. The Skorath's aggression was channeled into sport, their tactical brilliance into strategy games, their need for conquest into exploration of uninhabited space. Within a generation, the Skorath had transformed from the galaxy's greatest threat to productive, if still intimidating, members of the Alliance. Admiral Reeves, in his final report to the Alliance Council, delivered a warning that would be remembered for millennia. Humanity had shown what they were capable of when defending the innocent. They had demonstrated that their capacity for violence, when directed toward a just cause, could save civilizations. But he also warned that humanity would be watching. Any species that threatened peace, that preyed on the weak, would face the same fate as the Skorath. The galaxy had asked for humanity's help, and humanity had delivered. But the price was a new understanding. Humans were not just another species to be catalogued and studied. They were the guardians at the gate, the wolves who protected the sheep, the warriors who ensured that peace could exist because they were willing to wage war. As human fleets returned to Earth, leaving behind a transformed galaxy, Ambassador Zalara reflected on what had transpired. The Alliance had sought military aid and received something far more profound. They had gained protectors who understood that sometimes, to preserve peace, one must be willing to unleash absolute destruction on those who would destroy it. The age of unchallenged conquest was over. The age of human protection had begun. And across the galaxy, those who would prey on the innocent learned a new fear: the knowledge that somewhere in the cosmos, humanity was watching, waiting, and ready to bring relentless destruction to any who threatened the peace they had fought so hard to secure.